You're watching Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Alexander Rocott. These are the headlines. A roadmap to peace in the Democratic Republic of Congo as the M23 rebels and government forces sign a ceasefire deal in Qatar. Kenya drops terror charges against Boniface Mwangi following widespread condemnation. The activist was detained amid a wave of deadly protests against President William Ruto, who's been criticised for a heavy-handed crackdown. And with Senegal already crazy for mad fruit, a new project is hoping to promote it further afield. Thanks for being with us here on France 24. Now we begin in the eastern DRC, an area blessed with trillions of dollars worth of mineral wealth, including cobalt, copper, coltan and gold. But this blessing has all too often led to conflict, with the latest flare-up being between the Congolese army and the Rwanda-backed M23 rebels, the ethnic Tutsi-led group that says it's fighting to protect the rights of that minority community. Well, thousands have been killed and hundreds of thousands displaced this year alone. But a ceasefire deal has now been signed in Qatar. Our correspondent Emmett Livingston has the more details.
It's an important diplomatic breakthrough. After 3 months of secretive negotiations held in Doha, the Congolese government and M23 rebels signed a declaration of principles over the weekend, paving the way for a permanent ceasefire. Backed by Rwanda, M23 rebels captured huge swathes of territory in eastern Congo earlier this year, including the region's 2 largest cities. But international pressure, especially from the United States, forced both sides to the negotiating table. On Saturday, the 2 sides agreed to a declaration of principles, which is a roadmap for peace rather than a full peace deal. They committed to a permanent ceasefire, and the declaration of principles also contains commitments towards mutual prisoner releases, combating hate speech, the return of refugees, and on restoring state authority across Congo. Both sides have promised to put the Declaration of Principles into effect by the 29th of July. And most importantly, the Congolese government and the M23 have also said that they will start negotiating a permanent peace deal no later than August 8th. However, many of the stickiest problems remain to be worked out in these future negotiations. The M23 has promised that it won't leave the territory that it occupies, for example. And for the Congolese government, this is a core demand.
Well, the ceasefire deal has been met with relief in the key provincial capitals of Goma and Bukavu, which saw some of the most intense fighting as they were captured by the M23 rebels. Let's take a listen now to some reactions there.
It's a beacon of hope for hundreds of thousands of people who were directly affected by the atrocities of war. More than that, I also think it's a very significant step forward in the process of establishing peace in the east of the DRC, especially as the government has made a considerable concession in definitively agreeing to negotiate with the AFC M23, because not long ago the President of the Republic and the Congolese government in general swore not to negotiate with the AFC M23. I think in the end this is a very significant step towards peace.
As we see that some countries are starting to get involved, starting to take an interest in this issue, we can believe in it because it's been a long time, for years and years, when thousands of deaths have been recorded. Now we're tired. Let people sit down, let people face each other and tell the truth so that people can find lasting solutions to this issue.
Moving on now, Kenya has dropped terror charges against the human rights activist Boniface Mwangi following a national outcry, instead levelling the lesser charge of possession of ammunition. The photojournalist and politician pleaded not guilty and was released on 1 million shillings bail. That's a little over €6,500. He'd been covering a wave of deadly protests in the East African nation against President William Ruto, who has been criticised for his heavy-handed response. Bastien Renoy reports from Nairobi.
Boniface Mwangi is one of Kenya's most prominent activists. When the police accused him of facilitating terrorist acts, a coalition of 37 civil rights organizations called the move state intimidation. They described the arrest as the latest escalation in a systematic crackdown that has seen hundreds of young Kenyans detained on fabricated terrorism charges. After his release on Monday, they expressed their relief. They said said that the court's decision is a victory of the constitution over police overreach.
I think that it's clear now that what the state was trying to do, trumped up charges using terrorism laws to actually subvert the cause of justice, has been defeated. We are glad that the prosecution has dropped the terrorism-related charges, and they've now decided to work with possession of ammunition. This shows where we are as a country, that the government will stoop very low to just silence dissent, to silence critic, and we want to assure the government that we will continue with our work of ensuring that the constitution is protected and human rights are promoted.
Boniface Mwangi is now accused of illegal possession of ammunition, to be more specific, of a tear gas canister and a blank round. He denies this accusation, which is a minor offense compared to the previous terrorism charges. These charges are linked to a demonstration that was organized on the 25th of June. Among many others, Boniface Mwangi called the Kenyan citizens to take to the streets here in Nairobi to commemorate a demonstration that was organized a year ago, during which tens of thousands took to the street here in the capital to protest against a finance bill. During this demonstration, protesters briefly took control of the Kenyan parliament. The police shot at them. At that time, 19 people were killed, hundreds were injured, and since then more than 100 people have been killed by the police during successive waves of demonstrations.
Now, in May of 2024, just 2 months after giving birth for the second time, the Tunisian activist Sharifa Riahi was detained for harbouring illegal immigrants. More than a year later, she remains behind bars without charge. She's now become a symbol of what rights groups say is increasing repression of civil society by President Kais Saied, who's been ruling with unchecked power since dissolving parliament 4 years ago. Lauren Berstecker has more details.
Her hands trembling with emotion, Farida Riahi has to hold back tears as she looks at pictures of her daughter. The head of a Tunisian refugee support group, Sharifa Riahi, was arrested in May 2024 after being accused of harboring illegal migrants. Over a year later, the young woman still sits in prison without charge.
Sharifa has been in prison for a year and a week. She left behind a daughter who was just 2.5 months old and a son who wasn't even 3.
Riahi's story isn't an isolated case. Rights groups say her arrest is symptomatic of mounting repression against civil society under Kais Saied. The Tunisian president, who's been ruling by decree since dissolving parliament in 2021, has overseen a growing crackdown on political opponents, sub-Saharan migrants, and more recently NGOs and advocacy groups, which he regularly accuses of serving foreign agendas and undermining national unity.
Those who run these groups, most of them are traitors and collaborators.
Like Sharifa Riahi, at least a dozen civil society figures have been detained, and as many groups have had their assets frozen and their offices raided in recent years. Today, Tunisian activists and NGO workers have begun to hide out of fear of arrests or reprisals.
Today, expressing yourself as a civil society activist has become a threat. It's a threat because it makes you a target of stigma, intimidation, questioning, and surveillance.
While Kais Saied continues to reject accusations of authoritarianism, civil society groups, which had flourished in the wake of the 2011 Arab Spring uprising, appear increasingly under threat in Tunisia.
Last up, if I say the word mad fruit, many of you may think I'm talking about a hallucinogenic, but the mango-like crop, also known as weda, is a favourite in southern Senegal. Thanks to a project launched last year, it's becoming more widely available. Our correspondents in Senegal tell us more.
The month's forest in southern Senegal, the wild fruit mad grows. Lansana has spotted some kernels, hidden in the foliage more than 15 meters above ground.
When I climb, I can harvest 2 sacks of mad.
The price per sack is set at 14,000 CFA francs this year, just over 20 euros.
The fixed price works well for us. If there's a lot of mad, they buy it at the same price. If there's little, they still buy it at the same price. So that's an advantage for us who harvest it.
Thanks to the protected geographical indication, mad from Casamance is now certified as a high-quality product, harvested when ripe, with nature-friendly practices and processed without artificial dyes or preservatives. Mad is only harvested for 3 months a year, and processing remains largely artisanal, a challenge for producers.
We don't have large-scale systems yet, so we make do with a few freezers in the processing units. When you work manually, you can't produce in volume. It's small quantities that don't allow you to operate all year round. One of the biggest challenges is to industrialise the process to set up systems to preserve semi-processed products, like mad nuts, for example.
Less than 5% of the available raw material is processed each year. Mariama helped implement and guide the PGI certification process for MAD from Casamance.
There was a need to strengthen processing capacities with equipment, quality packaging and financial means to secure a supply of raw materials. On the marketing side, these stakeholders need access to more profitable markets to improve incomes of all involved.
According to actors in the industry, the MAD sector generates an average of 500 million CFA francs each year.
That's all for us here on Eye on Africa. Stay tuned, there's more world news coming up on France 24.
France 24 embraces digital. Live content at your fingertips. Special